Okay. First off, I'd like to welcome everybody. I have no idea what time it is. The time my watch has stopped.
6:04.
6:04. This is a meeting of the New Hartford Inland Wetlands Commission, a special meeting taking place Monday, June 28th, 2012 at 6 p.m. in the New Hartford Town Hall. The agenda for this meeting, and as you know, special meetings are restricted to the items on the agenda, is a joint meeting with the town of Barkhamsted. I believe it's the first time we've ever done this, Inland Wetlands Commission, to discuss concerns and approaches regarding protection of West Hill Pond. Normally at this point I just say who's here from my own commission because I know the names, but I think the easiest way to do this, this is Stacy Sefcik, our recording secretary, and on my right is Riston Blanca, enforcement officer. I'm Jaime Hall. I'm chairman of the New Hartford Wetlands Commission, and I think the easiest way to do this then is to start with you,
Michael Green. Wayne Risner, New Hartford.
And Wayne is seated as an alternate. Wayne is seated this evening for Nancy Perez, who could not come.
And John Greaser, Barkhamsted.
And you're the chairman of Barkhamsted.
Yes, I am.
Wonderful.
Gary Reynolds, Barkhamsted.
Chris Tooker, Barkhamsted.
Lou Moscartello, New Hartford.
Martha Sullivan, Barkhamsted. Ann Hall, New Hartford.
And I'd like to say I think this is a wonderful occasion. I'm not sure whether we'll get anything done specifically or not, but I think it's a wonderful occasion because we're all concerned about West Hill Pond. I see Troy Lyrics coming. We're all concerned about West Hill Pond, and as I said to somebody before the meeting, West Hill Pond simply does not realize that there is a town line that goes across the middle of it. And so whatever we do, these two commissions should be working together. And this is Troy Lemire, the New Hartford Wetlands Commission.
Sorry I'm late.
Quite all right. I think the best way to proceed at this point would be for each of us to, perhaps you would be willing, have you had any particular concerns, problems regarding the lake and activities around the lake that you're specifically really deeply concerned about as a commission as a whole, or is it just a general concern?
Well, I think it would be general, and Arista was our acting enforcement officer. We typically, I don't know if it was a yearly event or bi-yearly or whatever, one of the residents would visit us for the, typically during the drawdown, for repairs and maintenance and the like. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't recall any specific applications that came before the commission over the course of the years that we dealt with that created an immense concern.
Barkhamsted doesn't have the residential base that we have. You know, a lot of their applications are the LAPOA, and the chairman and the owner are the president of LAPOA, who shares the concerns when he makes applications. They're always really good applications because he's the president of the LAPOA Beach Club. The couple years I was there, we really didn't get a lot of other applications from the few residents that are around the lake. But I think that because they have one of the biggest beaches, you know, which is one of the biggest impacts to the lake, that that it's very important that both towns are on the same page.
Yeah.
They don't have this, you know, we have similar beaches, but they don't have a lot of the residential problems that we run into.
I mean, maybe you can share with us, unless someone else from our commission is connected to a specific concern up there, other than what we've already addressed at meetings in the past. You can share what specifically has affected this commission in this town
Well,
And maybe we can foresee that potential
Right.
impact on our town, but.
well, I think is just as a bit of background then, we've been talking, we get a number of applications every year for one form or another of work, as I said, mostly during the drawdown. And a great many of these involve replenishing beaches. And I think it's been a growing concern, I'm gonna ask everybody to say something about it. I think it's been a growing concern of ours that there is something a little bit odd about spending time and effort in the commission trying to prevent sedimentation from roads and from work around the lake, residential. We've got a lot of residential around the lake, and I think it was sort of a growing conviction that there's something just a little strange about trying to prevent sedimentation coming from around the lake, and at the same time saying, well, sure, let's dump a few yards of sand in. I think this is really where it all started, and I should say this has been going for a while in our commission. And having said that, you know, not so much on the basis of specific applications or specific activity. I'd like to just start with you, Mike, just go around, and what concerns do each of you, don't have any, you don't have to say anything, but what concerns would each of you have regarding maintaining the water quality of the lake? We all know the history of the lake, I don't have to go into that. It's the cleanest, or if not the cleanest, very nearly the cleanest lake in the state. And the objective of the exercise is to keep it that way. But so I thought I'd start with you, Mike, and just what thoughts do you have about what might need to be done, what could be done about maintaining the water quality and the character of the lake?
Well, they don't allow any motor-propelled boats on the lake.
Low horsepower.
Under 8 horse.
8 horses at that?
Only, when it's regulated by the DEP from Labor Day to Memorial Day.
Well, that would be perhaps the most obvious and most easily corrected thing that I can think of.
Okay. Wayne?
Well,
Speak up, man, I know you have some thoughts.
I came upon a website sponsored by the state of Michigan, and the state of Michigan is surrounded by a lot of water, a lot of fresh water, including Lake Michigan as well. And a website specifically stated and pointed out the
These
reason
are
why.
prints of a couple of pages in that website, or at least the first page of it, so everybody would.
The reason why we really should not be continuing to allow sand to be dumped around our freshwater lakes and ponds. There's a number of points in this article that, talk about, and I think the impact of dumping sand is really profound with the first statement. The creation and maintenance of sandy beach is often an objective of waterfront property owners, but creating a sandy beach, however, can negatively impact water quality, and that's what we're here for today. I think I'm thinking one of the big things that we may be neglecting is completely looking at the concerns of the moms with their little kids going on a beach, which I think is great. The beaches that are there, it's great to, kind of see that maintained, because it's been there. But we're also forgetting about the fishermen that want to come to West Hill and want to still catch the fish that are there, that are living there, the salmon, the trout, whatever. And if you look at this article, it talks about the physical, the chemical, and the biological impacts of dumping sand, and it's not good. None of them are good. So I'm trying to think about how we're going to have to establish a balance, because you can't say to the people that enjoy the beaches that are established now that you're not going to see sand there anymore. I mean, we we have to still kind of allow the maintenance of that, but I think allowing any more beach to be created with the sand might be an issue. And I think, I'm also thinking that if both wetlands commissions work together to educate the public on why, and as this states, there's some points right here on how to do it. If we can both educate the public with a documentation, our own document, explaining to the residents why we really don't want to promote the unrestrained dumping of sand everywhere that people want to dump it because they want to squish their toes in the sand and feel like they're at Hammonasset or in Watch Hill. I mean, I think this would be something good because they own property and they want to see the integrity of the lake maintained as well. So I think we have to strike a compromise between the beaches that are there. We don't want the moms getting upset that they can't bring their little, kids and their relatives to the beach on a 95, 100-degree day. But at the same time, I think if we don't come up with a policy to restrict the individual property owners from just creating beaches that don't belong there to begin with, we are going to have a problem with degrading the water quality, and I think it's something we really need to think about. And again, I think emphasizing the creation of a document from both of inland wetlands councils here, or commissions, would really look good, that we're unified on this and we're helping everyone to protect the lake's integrity, and that's helping to protect the interests of the property owners as well. So I think there's got to be a compromise here, though, because the beaches are there. We can't say you can't have sand there anymore. The beaches are there. They've been there. We want to allow the maintenance of those beaches, but to in large areas, or to just allow anybody to dump sand at will, I think is something that has to be talked about and some type of restriction and policy put in place. Because, like I said again, let's not forget the fishermen who come to West Hill to fish. It's one of the cleanest lakes in the state, and those fishermen have a right. They spend the money on the bait and tackle shops and rent the boats and everything else. So I think that's, it's a generation of income and money and revenue. I think we have to protect that as well.
Has all of the sand that is there been imported?
Yes.
Yes.
I should point out from the geologic standpoint, geomorphic standpoint, West Hill Pond in its original condition had no sand whatsoever. The surrounding soils are entirely a silt clay till. There is no natural sand in the watershed of West Hill Pond. All the sand, all of the beaches which exist at the present time are imported.
I think the Barkhamsted side, you guys see more than we do the movement of sand because you have the dam. And every, 5 years, John Pelletier comes in with his application and he has to get all that sand out of there. And that's every couple years that he has to do that. So that's kind of what this article says and what this commission has been concerned about. Where does that sand go? And it washes from the lake and it goes all right over to his house. A lot of that comes from Lapoa, but a lot of that also comes from just regular residents and people dumping sand at the lake too.
And it goes a lot further than that, because I've got it all the way down in front of my house, down the brook, right down through there.
There you go.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah. I might also point out from the geology standpoint that of all possible particle sizes for soil materials, from the finest clays to the coarsest possible gravels, of all possible particle sizes, beach sand is the most easily eroded and the most easily moved.
But we had a similar, on a relatively smaller scale, not too long ago, we addressed a concern was brought to us and the commission acted on the concern, and it did involve deposition of sand along one of our brooks, a nice habitat for brook trout, etc. And we did direct that particular applicant to remove the sand and replace with more indigenous plantings and work with soil scientists in restoring it to a more natural habitat.
He was
Wow.
perfectly willing too. I mean, he
Pardon me?
he
Yeah.
thought it was a good idea.
Because he was caught.
But he wanted
They usually think it's a
he
good
wanted
idea.
to get it
To
to
a more natural state, I think, and he was willing to do some plantings
Yes. So,
instead.
yeah, so given the fact that he was apprehended after the apprehension, he was a willing
Well, you know, I think that comment, because he was caught, yes, but there's another facet to that, which is a sheer lack of knowledge.
Yeah, he didn't really know. That's the way, when he bought the property, that's the way it was, and so he was restoring it to back to what he thought it was supposed to be
I think this is
until
one of
he
the,
learned.
I think this is one of the keys to it, and Wayne hit it a couple of times there, is the notion of just getting the word out. Why do we want to do this, and why is sand maybe not the best idea in the world at West Hill Pond? It's fabulous on Hammonasset. You know, I'm all for it. But maybe West Hill Pond isn't the place for massive sand beaches. You mentioned that you had seen sand moving in your area.
Yep, I'm out over on Basulac,
Yeah.
and especially when they do the drawdown, the brook in front of my house, it becomes a raging river. And then afterwards, there's all kinds of sand. It's not all coming from the lake. I mean, I'm sure it's washing off the roads too. But there's an awful lot of it coming down from the lake.
I bet a lot of it comes from the lake.
And I think the important thing too, we're all here talking about West Hill Lake, because that's what we have in common, but all of this applies to any freshwater water body you have in your towns. So, I mean, we're talking about West Hill because that's what we all have in common, but I think it's important that we know that it's not just this lake that we should be concerned about these things, because it, you know, for your stream with this guy that didn't know it, the same things apply, you know.
I know we've had people from the Farmington watershed people, whatever they are. They've come out, and I know they've been testing the brook for beneficial organisms and creatures and stuff like that. They're saying that the water is awful warm coming down through is because obviously it sits out in the sun and it's not moving that fast. But what they're trying to do is they found contaminants further down, and they're trying to find out where they're coming from. And it's been pretty interesting talking with them.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
I hate to think. Yeah.
Well, they're wondering if a lot of it is from fertilizers from people's lawns and stuff like that, getting into the water and then coming down through.
When the conversation gets around to me,
Yeah, that certainly would be a related concern, I would think.
when the conversation gets around to this end of the table, I'm gonna say some words about it. Do you have any comments?
Well, what little I know about that our end of West Hill Lake is that there is the private beach, the association that has the beach there, and there is the outlet to the lake there as well. And I think the combination of the two is causing a little disruption and some sand to be on the move. I can't foresee beaches and other locations, be it, I don't know if there's even one at Brody Park or at the other end, migrating to that end of the pond. I don't think that's feasible really to happen unless you've got some kind of big flows in the pond, but that's all spring fed, I thought, with the exception of maybe some inlets. But what you do have down in that area, now you've got some velocities that are created, and I think they come to us every couple or few years to the association to restore that beach. And I don't know if they import more sand at those times, more so than they kind of reclaim what's been on the move towards the outlet.
I think it was a reclamation, if I recall, maybe Rissa, you
This past application was a reclamation, but prior ones was just bringing in more sand. This year, and my understanding is when they take it out of the lake, it's not clean enough, you know, for them to want to reuse it, so they have been just leaving it there. This past time, they did come in and ask to take it out and move it back up. You know.
Other than that, my time on the commission, I'm not aware of any other projects that imported sand to West Hill. Really, that's the only activity. I mean, some of the other activities that we see on the commission are some stone wall repairs.
recently, yes, but no fill.
Right, nothing to involve any fill. We haven't seen any cottages or docks even that I'm aware of that have come through. So, I mean, the activity besides the association has been pretty minimal. But I think, as I mentioned, you know, you've got a combination of two things. There's been a beach created there, and also you've got the velocities of the outlet, especially when they draw it down, which is going to disrupt and material.
I think if one thinks about it though, you have clearly, it's very visible on the beach with the outlet there. But if it happens to that beach, it will happen to all of the beaches, whether they're a small private beach or one of the, for instance, Brody Park. It's just may not necessarily get to the outlet, but where does it go? It clearly is moving because these beaches have to be, people come in and has to replenish them. Clearly the sand is moving. And the question which people need to think about is, okay, where is it going? And the answer is it goes into the bottom of the lake. It moves down into the lake. And inevitably is changing the character of the bottom of the lake, both near shore and in the deeper areas. It has to be. The stuff doesn't just vanish. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. Troy?
Well, as you know, Jamie, I was one of the driving forces that asked for our two commissions to get together. I'm totally against having sand in the lake because I think the quality of the lake in the last, couple decades has been going downhill, and I joined this commission as one of the reasons to save our natural resource that we have that is very important to this community. And I believe that by reusing the sand, there's more bacteria, so I don't know if that's a good option. I would say that the sand on the inland part would be something that I'd be working with. Anything that enters the water, I'm totally against. I think we need to come up with some kind of a maintenance for winter storms that could cause erosion. If we're going to allow these beaches, to private beaches and the town beach, to put sand on their inland, there should be a way to protect it from going into the lake during the winter months. That could be without having any disruption from people being there. And I think we need to also do something. What you're going to talk about is the fertilizer. We should put a restriction on what kind of fertilizers that can be used around the water's edge, or that could get into the water.
Yeah, possibly more extensive than just the water's edge.
Yeah, so I welcome you guys from Barkhamsted. I'm glad that we got together. It took a while for us to do this, but the sand has been a thorn in my bottom, and I think that it's causing a lot more problems than we actually know. So I think if we work as a team, we can come up with some good ideas to keep the lake from deteriorating.
Lou?
Really can't add too much beyond what's been said. We've had numerous discussions on our commission about this, and basically I think the bottom line is we need to educate the people, and it needs to be a cooperative effort between Barkhamsted and New Hartford. Like Troy's saying, we don't want to see the lake go downhill anymore. Being that it's one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest in the state, we'd like to keep it that way. And I'm sure Barkhamsted feels the same way, and it's going to take a cooperative effort and a whole lot of education to do that.
I don't really have much more to offer. I think people are hitting on some good points.
Ann?
It's interesting, I think, it's perhaps in some ways slightly, one might dare to say, almost unfair for Barkhamsted, because I get the distinct impression that, frankly, most of the problem is coming from Hartford. And that's simply a matter of numbers. I know we had in the last drawdown, we had a number of, what started this whole discussion going, a number of applicants, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember the number, but came in asking to put sand in the lake. And frankly, it's geomorphology, as we've stated before. That's not natural, and we're spending quite a bit of money as a town to keep sediment from other sources out. It's a bit backwards. And so, as Wayne said, I think
yes, that there probably should be some compromise. Perhaps there are some ingenious ways of landscaping that you can have sand on the shore and at least minimize, can't completely get rid of it, but at least minimize the amount of sand that then gets into the water. And honestly, in my own opinion, I think in the water, more indigenous materials, be they of the various gravels, would be perhaps more appropriate. It's also more beneficial for the fish. Trout much prefer gravel to sand. So, but I do think though that whatever ends up happening, I do hope that two commissions can work together, because obviously it is one body of water, and it's certainly, from a very practical standpoint, it is a matter of education. It's much easier if the people in both towns don't look at the other town and say, well, wait a minute, they're doing something completely different. That's really all I have.
Speaking just for myself, I have two concerns. I've known the lake probably longer, well, maybe not necessarily longer than you, but probably longer than pretty much anybody else here, simply because I'm older. And one of my major concerns is the sand. Not it partly as largely as a source of contamination to the lake, as a degradation of the lake bottom quality, as a degradation of the water quality as a whole. The other concern, which I alluded to briefly, however, is nutrient loading. And since we started out this whole conversation with sand, is how we got here, but since this is a general thing on protection of West Hill Pond, I have watched over the years, and I have some interesting photographic evidence on it, the color of the lake water has changed. It's not enough to pick up, we had some water quality studies done recently, it's not enough to pick up really in the water quality studies the very low levels, it's still very low levels, so we have time, not very much time, but there is a little time, of nitrate and phosphate has increased over the years, but it's still extremely low. But where you see it is in a subtle change in the color of the water. The water is greener now than it was when I was a kid 70 years ago on the shore of the lake. And this is, the problem is it's an exponential thing, because as nutrient levels increase, plant life particularly in the lake increases. This brings in additional nutrients in and of itself. And this is something which is of concern to me. So not only what do we do about sand getting into the lake, but I think the other thing which we, as both of us as commissions, need to pay some attention to is fertilizers and other nutrient loading, particularly fertilizers, around the lake. Possibly just in our buffer zones. Maybe that's the only areas we want to worry about. I'd be interested in people's thoughts on attempting to educate in the entire watershed of the lake. It's actually not that big a watershed. We're not talking about huge land areas here. It doesn't extend that far beyond Niles Road on the one side, on the east side. On the south end of the lake, it extends hardly past West Hill Road at all. And on the west side of the lake, it extends up into the two big scout camps, with some settlement right along the shore of the lake. And on the west side, it is largely the two big scout camps. There is a group of cabins between Worcombe and Sequosson's area, Sequosson's shoreline. But you don't have to fertilize a lawn. It's not necessary. It is necessary if you want your lawn to look like something from a Scott's advertisement on evening TV, or from a Home Depot advertisement on evening TV. If you want it to be that glorious green, which has been fiddled by adjusting the color balance of the camera, then yeah, you gotta fertilize it. But you don't have to make a lawn grow. I'm not anti-lawn. Lawn is not a bad thing. I've got a fairly decent sized lawn myself. But you don't have to pour fertilizer on it. You don't have to pour herbicides on it. So this is another aspect of this which I think we should, as our two commissions, take into account. I think the other big question which I have on this is, how do we want to try to approach this? We have my own feeling on it, and again, I'm going to go around the table and get people's opinions. My own feeling on it is, I'd rather start out with a well thought out and crafted program of education for everybody who is in the watershed. Particularly, there are some targets which we can go and talk to very specifically. We can go and talk to the rangers at the two big camps. In principle, we can talk to the New Hartford Recreation Commission, your Lake Owners Association, your private beach. But I think we need to reach out. My own feeling is to start by reaching out with an educational effort. We have the authority, if we wish to do so, to create regulations in addition to or more drastic than the standard regulations. We can, if we wish to do so, we can write a regulation which will simply say, thou shalt not deposit sand in the lake, period, article, whatever. Personally, I'd rather not do that, if we can help it. I'm not totally ruling it out. But again, I'd like to go around the table and see what people's thoughts are on how do we approach this.
And just to,
Having decided that this is something we want to do, and I think I sense a great deal of uniformity on that, how do we want to approach this problem?
and I just wanna add, putting sand within your regulated area or in the lake is already regulated.
Yeah, that's
It's a deposition.
It's already regulated by these commissions, we already have the right to review these applications. So when we review them, you know, I think what James talking about is above and not a further regulation to regulate them, but a prohibition to it in the regulation. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that we still have the right to regulate it and
Yeah,
say no on a case-by-case basis. But do we wanna say no in general, or do we wanna try an education approach?
Yeah, that's basically it. Problem, I might point out, the problem with saying no on a case-by-case basis is that technically, as I'm sure you are all aware, technically, if we are to deny an application for, let's say, putting in 10 cubic yards of sand, we need to have grounds on which to deny it. We need to have some testimony.
So what signs do you guys already have? Do you have any signs? You said you've been monitoring, I don't know.
The problem is I am not sure, and I'd have to ask.
I mean, the science would certainly be.
The science is there, there's no question that the science is
So
there.
that's one of your arguments when you
Yeah.
present an educational.
But the real question there is, the science is there, and Wayne's handout shows you a lot of it right there.
Well,
But I'm
But
referring specifically to our lake. to our-
My interpretation, I may be in error here, but my interpretation is that if we were to sit down and deny an application, we would need to have that testimony specifically addressed to that application. Krista, can you comment on that?
I can't. But it can be general information about West Hill. And you know, sand in West Hill is bad because, and we have a file here, we started emails from our attorneys, emails from our engineer about the overall general concerns. The problem is, and you may be wondering, why does something come from Michigan? Is because there is no literature about sand in the lake. There's, you know, if you're gonna do it, you should have in Connecticut, if you do it, you should have clean washed sand. We've talked to Chuck Lee at DEP, and West Hill Lake is the only lake in Connecticut without any algae growing. So it's a high priority for them, so they've been calling me on a related topic, but nothing to do with wetlands commissions, with what planning and zoning is doing. And I said, well, I have you, what do you suggest? And he goes, we don't think it's a good idea to put sand in there, but we don't have any literature. We don't have any suggestions, just if somebody's gonna do it, it should be clean sand, it should be washed sand, it should be of a certain size. George Knockline, who did the study along with Roger Hilba around West Hill Lake, to identify and rate all the inflows into the lake. We talked with him, and similar concerns that we've all said. It's not a good idea, but there's no precedent or anything to say, yes, you should or no, you shouldn't type of thing. So I think if we had an educational form or something that listed the impacts, and that was, presented at every application, it may give us enough information, but at that point, we don't even have that. We have we're building the information, but we don't
So
have.
basically, as it stands right now, the scientists are all saying, from what I understand, it's a bad idea to put sand in, but the regulatory boards and commissions and all of that haven't caught up on it.
Well, it's that, and it goes a little bit beyond that. It's that, and they haven't weighed out the negative impacts to the lake versus the benefits of the use of the lake and what people want. And, how long exactly will it take to fill in, or what will, there's really no checks and balances. So yeah, it's not a good idea, but when is it gonna be a bad idea? That really hasn't washed out yet. And I think that Jamie's right, where we don't wanna, like, what was that lake, I don't wanna say Crystal Lake, Candlewood Lake. We don't wanna be in a position where now we're restoring our lake. We have a pristine lake, we wanna keep it and be kind of proactive, but there's really no proactive approach yet. Everybody's a restoration approach. Oh, yeah, the sand caused this problem, we gotta take the sand out, but am I explaining that correctly?
We're trying to be proactive instead of reactive.
So,
Rista mentioned Crystal Lake. I don't know whether the rest of you are familiar with Crystal Lake at all. Crystal Lake is over in Manchester, Connecticut. It's not genuinely comparable to West Hill Pond. The geology is somewhat different. It's also not genuinely comparable because it's closer to Hartford. And the impact of development on it was earlier than it is here. The bottom line of the impact, just to throw out a bit of shudder here, in my previous incarnation as a civil engineer, the bottom line of it was a $200 million sewage treatment system, which was financed by the towns. That's a lot of money, and that's something we want to avoid. So anyway, what I'd like to do, again, go around, what do people think is the best approach? I think you've heard Ann, myself, both saying and Krista, let's try education first, but I'd like to hear everybody else's opinion. If we have some folks here, and I wouldn't be surprised if Troy said, get out a sledgehammer. I want to hear it. Anybody?
Sure. That's only one quiver, that's only one arrow in the quiver. The sledgehammer, I don't think that should be used first. Education is certainly primary means to, I think, address this particular concern. How the methods, we can pin that down, I suppose. But I'm still a proponent of finding some science. Maybe an individual like Dr. Clements, who completed our biological study in our town, coming together and finding that particular scientist. Of course, that's going to cost money. share whatever is allotted in the budgets.
But science to specifically say, because I mean, the scientists have said, sand is a bad idea, but science to specifically say in this location of West Hill.
Because this is what we're addressing,
Well, I think
specifically, we're not
that's-
addressing all the generic concerns
Right.
apply here,
Right.
which I think should be part of the educational process, but it all boils down to this specific entity right here.
What's really interesting is, I talked to an official at the deep, she agreed with everything here.
Yeah.
And I said, so why isn't something available on the state of Connecticut website to further support? She says, well, it's something you need to look into. Yes.
I think one of the things
So-
we need, I think one of the things we need to face as a group, as our little crew assembled here, I think one of the things we need to face, frankly, is that whether we like it or not, we're on the leading edge of this. We really are, as is becoming apparent from people's remarks here. This kind of concern has not surfaced. We're on the leading edge of trying to take this kind of proactive approach. Some people aren't very comfortable with marching in the van.
If I might, I think the education is as the first step, but also, again, from a sort of somewhat, say cynical point, part of the education, honestly, is so that the precedent is there to at least be able to say, well, actually, there's reasonable improvement, and also the science, reasonable improvement, to be able to use the sledgehammer if we needed to, specifically against a very large application of sand that might occur. And without that education, without that science, I don't see that being, in fact, a possibility at the moment.
Particularly with an obstinate applicant. And I can think of at least two who might prove very obstinate, right off the top of my head, without any trouble at all.
The other thing that this commission has talked about as far as education is a lot of people, which I would assume is the case in Barkhamsted, because we don't get a lot of applications. A lot of people don't know that they need to even come in and apply for something like that. They don't realize that they need an application to put sand in, and they do it, on a weekend when, none of us are around. I don't think any of us have a place on the lake, so we don't, we're not out there on boats, we're not out there seeing what's going on. It's done on weekends, it's done on holidays. So part of the education is what we're talking about, but it's also letting people know that they have to come before us when they do those things so that we can regulate it and monitor what's going on.
Also with the education, you also need to educate the realtors in the area too. If you're selling a cottage or something like that, these people that are buying, that are coming from out of the area, also need to be aware that there are regulations that you're gonna have to go to the different towns to have approved.
That's a very good point too, because a lot of people coming from out of the area,
They don't know.
they don't know. Not only do they not know that there are regulations and that we even exist, but a lot of people make the unconscious equation. Waterfront, beach, sand. There's an equivalence there in the minds of a lot of people. I mean, if you think the initial association of waterfront for most people has to do with a beach umbrella and maybe a sand castle over here and a little surf. When did you slip in?
About 10 minutes ago.
This is
You're doing a fine job.
This is Jack. This is my vice chairman. But there's this real equation. But so am I sort of hearing that education is kind of a step one, and then see if we can get some scientific.
I think there are people out there who buy the property or, inherited the property, and there was always a beach there, so they just continued. Or maybe if they know that it's not the lake, and people are more conscious of these things as generations go on, that they'd be willing to make it smaller, to do more plantings.
Everybody
They're
wants
made
to
aware of.
sunbathe in a mud pond.
No.
But I think the other thing there though is to also with the education, part of effective education is to have positive alternative. Yeah, so it isn't, you have a choice between sand and mud, you have a
Right,
choice
yeah.
between sand and
Wash pea stone.
wash pea stone, but also simply, you know, maybe some sort of structured planting or some other alternative.
Well, and as a couple of you have said, 3 or 4 of you have said, there's no real problem with sand up shore, up gradient from the water, provided it doesn't get into the lake. This is not one of our problems. This is not where we're going. So if you want to sunbathe in the sand, the beach, as long as it's arranged in such a way that it doesn't flow into the lake, it's not going to contribute, in my view.
Could you bulkhead the properties to keep the sand away from the indigenous?
There are a lot of, I think there probably is many different valid approaches to that as there are properties and engineers. I certainly would be delighted to encounter any, as a commissioner, I'd be ecstatic to see any approach that, I have, as a commissioner, I have no interest in prescriptive approaches at all.
The other thing that you brought to mind for me was that is any consideration being given to the adverse effects of leaching fields?
For me, that is a sore point. I've got a little handout here. Let me put it this way. As I mentioned, there was a civil engineer in the previous incarnation, not well, I don't do it. It is possible, although it's not inexpensive, it is possible to build a leaching field which has 0 contaminant discharge.
It is.
No nitrate, no phosphate discharge. It can be done. It's not as cheap as a conventional field. Unfortunately, it is also not the standard approved design of a leaching field in Connecticut. Connecticut uses an out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach to septic systems, which is fine locally, but it does not remove particularly nitrate effectively. It can be done, honestly, since leaching fields is not an area where the wetlands commissions have a tremendous amount of jurisdiction, and we have no jurisdiction over the design of the field at all. That is completely preempted by the health district.
By who?
By the health district. That is an area where one can hope that education might be effective, but I think it's another topic. I think it's a very important one. I mentioned Crystal Lake. There is a big lake which I was also involved with in 2 big lakes, Bomazine and Fairfield in Vermont, both of which had to sewer all of the properties around the lake to keep it from being the point where you could walk across it.
It's probably too late for that.
No. Could be done. It wouldn't be cheap, but it could be done. I have prepared here, yes, well,
I just wanted to add that while you're talking about those lakes, if you wanna see what happens to a lake when nutrients are allowed to go in, septic systems are allowed to drain in, improper use of sand, Lake Pocatello
oh yeah,
turns a murky green about August or even before then because of the nutrient loading.
Yep.
They've actually had to put chemicals in the lake to kill off the algae, and thousands of fish come floating up on people's beaches. It's not exactly the best odor you wanna be around. And that's what you're facing if you don't manage this properly.
Which town is that?
Lake Pocatello, East Hampton.
East Hampton.
And it's a big lake, but it's suffered the fate of what we're trying to avoid here.
They do it on Highland Lake too.
Yep.
Same thing.
Highland Lake, same thing, that's right.
The Warmbog is bordering on it. It's getting there. I have prepared, and this is entirely my own preparation. You can throw it out, you can make it into paper airplanes, it's a fairly decent paper next to Vista. I have prepared, in anticipation of all of this, a draft, a very, very rough draft. It has no pictures, it has no decent formatting, it has nothing except words, of a possible educational pamphlet which could be sent could be certainly given to every applicant. It could potentially be sent to every person in the watershed. This might be a useful way to spend some money. What I'd like to do is give a copy, is pass it around to people, and what I would like you to do, we said there was going to be a test at the end of this meeting, remember? Homework. This is homework. What I would like you all to do is look at it and write all over it. Consider this as a possible educational pamphlet for the general public, not for us. In principle, we know what we're doing. In practice, I'm not so sure all the time, but in principle, we know what we're doing. But consider this as a possible thing for the general public. And write all over it. Rewrite the whole thing if you want to. Rewrite the whole thing if you want to. Or tell me, and through me, the commission, that this is ridiculous, this isn't how we want to do it at all. But I'd really like to start working on this. I really think what I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing, and maybe I'm out of my mind, is we really want to do something here. And yeah, let's start with education. And so that's kind of what I'm taking a look at here as a start. Please feel, if you don't like it, make it into a paper airplane, give it to the dog, give it to the cat, whatever. But please, see if we can do a little bit of work on this and see if we can come up with a joint pamphlet. That's why, one of the reasons I wanted everybody here. See if we can come up with a joint pamphlet between the towns of Barkhamsted and the towns of New Hartford Wetlands Commissions that we can give to everybody concerned with the lake as an educational document.
And I have a suggestion that we stuff it in the tax bill, so it saves us money and everybody gets one.
Not a bad idea. It's a little late for that this year, but
Right.
Take it to New Hartford Day up there in Brody.
take it to New Hartford Day, stuff it in tax bills next year, just to hand it out to everybody who comes into her office. Every way we can possibly publicize.
Is there a property owners association?
There he is, and we'll get it to them too, but I don't want to put it out to people until I have responses from as many of you as feel that you can make a response.
And you can go to Debbie, and Debbie can
Well,
forward it to me, or you can call me directly, whatever that you wanna do.
We'll continue the discussion at our next meeting, which is in a week, and brainstorm some more. We'll have an opportunity to review this by then.
Great,
Not saying we'll get it back individually, but maybe just as a consensus.
that'd be wonderful.
Usually,
Get back to Rista, and Rista will feed it all back to me.
I'll try to look around to see if anyone has assembled PowerPoint presentation
Superb.
that maybe the towns could use.
Yep.
Just to
Add to it.
add to the presentation for the general public, or just to have to talk about that might be.
Anybody else who, we have 2 or 3 school teachers on this commission, let's see what we can do in the way of an educational effort here.
Your initial, have you contacted
property
emails?
owners seem to share our concerns.
Yes.
We've looked, but
As a
Regarding
matter of
sand
fact,
and
that's,
lakes and ponds.
that was the
Really?
initial impetus for all of this came from the Property
I haven't
Owners
looked recently,
Association.
but I looked when, 6 months ago,
Maybe we should all check
yeah.
non-point solicitation.
Yeah.
There must be some link on there.
So, it's 7 o'clock, which is the time for our regular meeting here. And I am very pleased with this, and I am so happy that you people came. And I hope we can do it again.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah.